Today we are going to be learning how to make puff pastry. Now at the beginning of the quarantine, I started baking and using store-bought puff pastry like Pepperidge Farms and stuff like that. By the middle of the quarantine, I realized in order to step up my baking game, I needed to make my own puff pastry. I needed to understand the science behind puff pastry. So I enlisted the help of my friend Julia. She came over one day and we sat down and she taught me how to make puff pastry from scratch. Now legend has it that puff pastry is very hard to make. There's the folding of the butter into the dough, and then there's the temperature part of it where you have to keep the dough and the butter at a certain temperature so it doesn't melt. But at the end of it all, I realized it's not that scary and it's not that daunting to make. It's actually very, very easy. Although tedious, it is super, super manageable, and I'm going to teach you how to make puff pastry from scratch today. Alright, first let's go through the ingredients. We'll need 2 cups minus 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And yes, that's a very specific amount of flour. We'll also need 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We'll need 3/4 cups plus 2 tablespoons of cold water. And finally, we'll need 1½ sticks of unsalted butter. Room temperature. Let's move on into making our dough. So first, I like to sift the flour into a large mixing bowl. Get out any large clumps of flour. Next, add your salt, and then add your cold water. Now combine all the ingredients together and work it into a dough. Now once you have your dough, it should be a sticky dough. Form it into a ball, and because it's a sticky dough, you want to use a lot of flour to dust your work surface and cover it with the mixing bowl. And now we're gonna let it rest for 15 minutes just so that it can get to room temperature. And during that time, we're gonna head over to our butter. Hopefully you've taken out the butter like an hour beforehand so it can get down to room temperature. If not, throw it in the microwave and microwave it for roughly, I don't know, like 20 seconds, 15 seconds. Don't melt the butter, you just want it to be at room temperature. So whenever you do have room temperature butter, go ahead and stir it and get it to be a smooth, buttery paste. Now we have our dough ball ready to go at room temp. We have the butter at room temp and it's all whipped up now. We are finally ready for the folding process. And here is fold number 1. To begin, we'll need a rolling pin, a rubber scraper, and a pastry knife. Like always when baking, flour your work area generously and gently press down on your dough and form it into a mini rectangle with your hands. Once it's pushed down, I find it easier to roll out. So next, use your rolling pin and roll out that dough into a 16 by 12 rectangle. Now once you have it rolled out, imagine your dough in sections of thirds. Seeing your dough in thirds is gonna be super key. So we're gonna take our butter, we're gonna apply it to 2/3 of our dough surface. So what I like to do is draw an imaginary line where we section off 1/3 of the dough, and that 1/3, we're not gonna touch it with any butter. The remaining 2/3 of it, we're gonna lather on the butter. Now be sure to only use 1/4 of your butter at this point because we're gonna be repeating this process four times. Now once you have the butter applied, go ahead and fold the unbuttered third of the dough over at the cutoff line over into the buttered section. And now you're gonna have the remaining 1/3 of the buttered section exposed, and we're gonna fold that over to the part we just folded in. So it's kind of like you're making one of those travel brochure pamphlets with dough. And I talk about all this folding stuff for a reason, because this folding stuff is the very reason why there are layers in puff pastry. And also the very reason why we're gonna put this whole thing into the fridge so that the butter doesn't actually melt into the flour. We wanna distinguish that butter and the flour as separate entities so that they can retain that layering effect. So from here, I like to fold in the edges, and I'm gonna take some plastic wrap and wrap it in plastic wrap, and we're gonna place it into the fridge for 15 minutes, just enough for the butter to harden up. All right, after 15 minutes, it is time for fold number 2. Out comes the dough. We're gonna put it back on a floured surface and again roll it out into a 16 by 12 rectangle. All right, so again, repeating the last step. And in fact, the next 2 steps are also repeating this step and the last step. It's all the same. It's all ditto. So imagine in thirds again, apply butter on 2/3 of your dough, fold the unbuttered third into the middle of your dough, and fold the remaining buttered dough on top of the rest of it, making that pamphlet again. I guess there is one thing I do differently at this step. Since there already is butter layered in, I like to also fold the pamphlet shape that it's in into itself one more time, just to create some more layers since the butter is already there. So I'm just constantly folding and folding and folding and folding. Now there is actually a formula out there where you, based on the number of times you fold and the number of times you repeat the process, you can actually calculate the number of final layers you'll have. At the moment, I don't want to do any math, so I'm not going to tell you what that equation is. I'm sure you can Wikipedia and find out for yourself. But anyways, back to our dough. Once it's folded in like this, go ahead and place it back into the fridge for another 15 minutes. All right, round number 3. Ditto. Imagine in thirds, we're gonna lather it up on 2/3, fold it up to the 1/3 side, and then halfway, then you fold it up to the center one more time, yada, yada, yada. And by this time, you'll actually start feeling the dough feel actually buttery. While you're working on it, your hands are warm, and you know, some of that butter will escape here and there. You'll actually feel that butteriness in your dough. So as you feel that butteriness in your hands, it's a constant reminder to work fast and get that thing back into the fridge as soon as you can. So once you're done with fold number 3, let's go ahead and place it back into the fridge for another 15 minutes. All right, and round number 4, we are now going to do it one last time. Same exact thing. Are you tired yet? But you know what? All this hard work and all this highly sophisticated engineering of butter folded into dough is gonna pay off in the long run. You're gonna thank yourself once you bite into that puff pastry after we bake it. So after folding it one final time, you are now officially done. Give yourself a pat on the back, and this is equal to 12 servings of egg tarts, 12 servings of pastries, however you want it, but that also depends on how much pastry you use. How I use up this pastry, it's about 12 servings for me. And if you don't know what to use your puff pastry for, if you're into something savory at the moment, I have a delicious curry puff video, or you can check out my Portuguese egg tart video, which is my fave, if you're into something sweet at the moment. Anyways, like always, make sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you have any ideas for me to make next, and I will see you next time.